All right. Well, we're live. Hi, everyone. This is our second episode doing this live. So feel free to ask any questions you have. Today's topic is similar to last week's. It's about a green card holder who's trying to get back into the country. I just did this case about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. But in, but unlike what happened the previous session, where we just focused on the whole issue of green card holders who are overseas trying to come back and the issues we dealt with, this particular story is so much more than that. It's arguably more complicated, but it touches on so many other things, right? When a green card holder is trying to get back into the United States, you might think it's just dealing with the customs officer at the border, but no. Presidents are involved, right? And so we're going to go through all of that. So today's itinerary, we're going to talk about and explaining the key issue. Then we're going to talk about news that you will not find anywhere else online, but we're going to talk about it right here and from an eyewitness account by me personally, right? I'll share very interesting things that I find interesting, at least, about the United States. And then we're going to go into the success story filming. And then after that, we're going to have a little banter, right? Galen is always asking really intriguing questions. Feel free to ask your questions as well. He'll record it, and then we'll be able to answer them. And then in the end, we'll bid goodbye, right? So in this time, that's what we're trying to do. These live sessions where I'm recording the success story. You know, I figure, why not, right? I'm already here. I'm already filming with Galen. We're having a great time. Why not make it live and make it available for all of you guys to watch as well? And if you guys have any questions, we'll just answer it during that time. And that might make the success story better, right? So that's the theory. We're going to try it out for an entire year. Feel free to give us any suggestions and how we can make it better. But here we go. Let's go, right? So the key issue is, as a green card holder, right? You've already got your visa. You already got your green card. And for these people, it's conditional green cards, but they've left the United States and they're trying to get back. Now, if you've seen other success stories that we've done, we make the plea to the CBP officers, the customs officer, that they deserve to come back, that they did not abandon their residency, that their family is here, that the reason why they're abroad is temporary in nature. So we've done plenty of success stories on that topic and how we go about doing it. And these clients are no different. It's actually two brothers. They're both coming in. They've been out of the country since 2018. 7 years, right? 7 years out of the U.S. They only have a conditional green card. Their 829 investment green card, EB5 green card, is not fully approved yet. They missed their biometrics appointment, so please let them in. So that's the story. We're going to dive into that story during the success story and how we eventually got them in. But their story is so much more than that, because there's a lot of things I cannot just say in the success story because then it'll be tangential. But during the live session, we can talk about it, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. Let me go through everything that happened. Okay, they found us in 2022. We spent 2 years preparing for their case. Their wives actually found us. So the wives found us. The wives and the children are in the U.S. Their husbands are not. And the wives really want the husbands to come back to help take care of chores. Husbands don't really want to come back. So it's actually really funny. 2 wives, 2 husbands. Both husbands don't want to come back. Both wives want them to come back. And it took 2 years to finally persuade the whole family. Say, yes, please go ahead and do it. Obviously, that's not the only reason. Another big reason is, well, it's really hard to come back. They couldn't get back. There was during COVID. There was a lot of business affairs abroad. They couldn't get on the plane. Just a lot of complications, right? And also, they had to fly to Mexico and then come back. They'd never been to Mexico before. They were worried. So it took 2 years to prepare all of that. Then in 2024, at the end of 2024, around August, September-ish, we planned everything out. I was ready. Our team was ready. They flew into Mexico and the entire plane got deported. Okay, out of Mexico. Boom, out. So these EB5 investors who invested millions of dollars in the United States, have companies, have employees, They're trying to get into Mexico, but they couldn't, and they got deported from Mexico. Green card holders getting deported from Mexico because new president of Mexico, Claudia, came into presidency, and the United States president during that time, if you don't remember, 2024, there was a spike in the number of illegal migrants coming to the country. Now, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Illegal migrants coming into the country of the United States, almost topping 300,000 apprehended a month. 300,000 apprehended a month. How many more is actually crossing? And there was a lot of pressure from the United States on Mexico to stop the flow of illegal migrants. The thing is, most illegal migrants are not flying into the U.S. Some are, I'm sure, but most are not. Nonetheless, there was so much pressure that they were worried, and so they were deporting a lot of people, including our clients' lawful permanent residents. And it wasn't just like a, sorry, can't get in, goodbye, get out. It wasn't that. They were locked in a room for like a day. Very little food, very little water, pretty much in detention. And then they got deported back. The frustration, the anger, it happened. So a new president came into play, having to fulfill the demands of this foreign policy of Mexico to not let migrants in. So they got deported. But they did not give up. From August, September, October, November, December, January, prepared everything again, and in February, they flew in again. So our team again on standby. This time we went a lot. Okay, so again, the tourist agency really failed them in the sense that they couldn't get them in. We were pulled in last minute. We even got a Mexico immigration attorney in Mexico that deals with Mexican immigration to go try to parole them and to get them in the country, saying that they are not a threat to Mexico, that they will definitely leave. But on president's order, none of those paroles work anymore during that time. So the Mexican immigration attorney couldn't do anything. Clients still got deported. So that's just how crazy of a mess that was. So the tourist agency failed. And then in February, we prepared everything. They flew in. And luckily, they successfully came in, right? We showed beyond a reasonable doubt that they are lawful permanent residents, that they're not going to overstay in Mexico. There's no reason to doubt them. So they got in. They got in close to midnight. On their way to the hotel from the airport, they got mugged. Lost their iPhone, lost their headphones, lost money, a couple $100. Right? But they are so frustrated at this point. But whatever, next day it's time to see the CBP officer. So our team was dealing with them emotionally, with the family. I mean, just everything was going wrong until I picked them up at 7 a.m. We went to see the officer, and we got in. So that is the issue. You could see how getting into the country of the United States as a lawful permanent resident, it's not just this, oh, I have a green card, I'm trying to make an argument. You have to deal with the Mexican consulate, you have to deal with hotels, you have to deal with crooked cops who's arresting people, stealing money. There's all sorts of things that's going on that we kind of have to deal with. And so this was a pretty intense story. Now, let's talk about news. I was just there for the past, I've been to Mexico pretty much every single week the paternity leave from January to February. Okay, so I'm technically supposed to be at home taking care of kids, but you know what? I these cases call me there. And the crazy thing is, in 2024, illegal apprehensions, apprehensions of illegal crossings topped 300,000 per month, most in history. It's insane. Estimated potentially almost 2 million illegal migrants crossing the border. Just as a context of that, do you know how many people live in Chicago? The entire city of Chicago, all of its skyscrapers, approximately 2 million people. So that means in 1 year, there's that many illegal people crossing. And probably just the southern border too, not including the northern border. And so that's a lot of people. But from 300,000 apprehensions per month, it dropped down to about 20,000 in January and February, right? Now, this is illegal crossings that I'm talking about. But the effect of the presidency on the southern border is not just on people who are crossing illegally. When I picked up these clients and we went to see the officer, there was like no line. Normally, when we're going to see the officer, we wait in line, we are on a bus, we have to see, there's like hundreds of people in front of us and behind us. It takes hours before we see a CBP officer, but before we could talk to a director. The chilling effect of the presidency on people crossing, on on U.S. citizens trying to come back in, on permanent residents trying to come back in, on visa holders trying to come back in, they are terrified. It's crazy. So that is what I'm trying to report. That there's just, I mean, normally it's 40, 50,000 people crossing the border legally per port of entry. Per port of entry, right? There's hundreds of ports of entries to get into the United States. Per port of entry, there's 40, 50,000 coming in. And that number has shrunk significantly to the point where for these clients, these two people who've been outside of the country for 7 years, they were terrified of coming in. When we went, it was pretty much all the officers versus us because there's like nobody else. So that's the news that I'm reporting. It's real. Whatever you see on the news, illegal crossings are down, legal crossings are down, and there's a very isolating feel to the United States compared to the rest of the world. But with all that being said, let's get to the success story, okay? All right, and then right after this, I'll answer any questions you guys have about this or about anything. Let me get some water. Okay, here. Okay. All right, well, that's all right. That's all right. I'll be better prepared next time. I'm using my water bottle to...
Do you want water? I can grab water, Joseph.
Yes, please. Yeah, that would be nice. But, you know, this... one thing about this whole Mexico entry thing is, and I guess I'll share about this later, but a lot of times I see the CBP officer, and when I explain, I'm an attorney, I'm representing a client, this is what we're doing, these are the arguments. You know, when I'm going through that, a lot of times the CBP officer gives me a smile and says, you don't need an attorney for that. You don't need an attorney to come into the country. You know, they're green card holders. They have the right to. Oh, do they not know all the things that go into that, right? The I-193 waivers, the 551 stamps, the trying to get into Mexico, preparing everything, not knowing how to speak Spanish, getting robbed, what to do, being on standby, filing the 551 stamp afterwards, getting the biometrics, filing the 829, getting the reentry permit, mailing it back. So many things go into it. Yes, the actual entry is just there, presenting documents, showing up, talking to the officer. There's not that much complicated at that very, very moment. But this case took like 2 years to get them deported from Mexico and then now coming in. It's absolutely insane. But that's what I do, right? It's interesting. It's fun. The world is complicated. I mean, that's why I like immigration law so much, because it's constantly changing. It's ever... You know, you're not dealing with static law, right? You might think like law is just archaic in the books. Immigration law literally changes by the presidency, by the agency, by the moment, by the court decisions. So it's absolutely insane. So pandemics affects it, you know, consulates affects it, other countries' presidency affects it, you know. So very, very fun. Keeps me on my toes. But let's get to the success story, okay? Hi, my name is Joseph, and I'm the managing partner here at Tsang and Associates, where we solve legal problems with creative solutions. And today's story is about two brothers who are trying to get into the country, and they've left the United States since 2018. They were EB-5 investors, so they invested a lot of money into the United States. It's kind of like the mini gold card that President Trump is talking about. That's how people used to get green cards when they're investing into the United States. But they did that. They got the conditional green card. However, because of business reasons, they had to be abroad and they couldn't fulfill that last technical step before they get their 10-year green card. And that's simply to get fingerprinted. It is like a 15-minute process to get fingerprinted, but they need to be here in the United States. But because of COVID and a lot of business reasons, they could not come back. Their wives, their children, everybody else was here, but they could not come back. Now, here's the problem. If you are a green card holder, regardless if you're a conditional green card or a permanent green card, 10-year green card, if you've left the United States for over a year, good luck, because you can be presumed that you have abandoned your green card. And so, because their 551 stamp was expired, because they didn't have a reentry permit, because their green card was expired, they could not get on an airplane to fly in. And even if they could, luckily, right, 1 out of 1,000 chance of getting on the plane, flying in, high chance that they will be NTA'd, notice of intent to appear, and sent to court. The family could not risk it. So from 2022 to 2024, we prepared their case so that they can try to come in. But crazy thing is, in 2024, new president in Mexico, they had to be deported back. We spent another 5 months to get them back into Mexico. I met them at Mexico. We prepared the case. They got, and a side story, which is another story, they got robbed on their way to the hotel. But luckily, the core documents were not lost. They did not lose their passport. They did not lose the green card. They did not lose their 551 stamp. They did not lose any of these things. And I was able to help represent them at the CBP, at the border, and get them in. Now, how do we do it? What do they go through? What's their story? Let's get to it. So that's the intro for the success story. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more of the specifics that I get to touch on earlier. This was a large family, right? 2 brothers. There's a lot of extended relatives, a lot of business, both in the U.S. and in China. They could not come back. A lot of times, people, when we do these type of cases, if green card holders left the U.S. for 5 years, 6, 7 years, we try to explain it by saying, well, there's somebody who's sick. 7 years is a long time for somebody who's sick, so that wouldn't fly. Now, in the course of 7 years, people did get sick, but it wasn't that strong of an argument. So we used it, but we coupled it with their unique situation. They got their green card from EB-5. They are investors. Their family is rooted here in the U.S. They have property here. They have business here. Their children go to school here. They really were tied up with their business overseas and they could not be back. And they did not apply for reentry permits, and their 551 stamp got expired and they need to do their biometrics. And so we were able to file a 551 for them. Well, we helped the family file it for them. We helped do some of the technical stuff. But the point is, so many things, okay? Their goal was to fly into the United States in 2024 before the 551 expired. But because they got deported from Mexico, we had to file 551 again afterwards. Luckily, everything got approved, so they were able to come in. And with the 551 stamp pending, appointment pending, the officer was able to see, oh, you are a green card holder, you have appointments scheduled, you have a good reason why you were out of the country, you have good established ties in the U.S. And the thing is, you know who's more annoyed about this case than everyone? It's the officers, because 2 years of preparation for this case, I've talked to this officer about their case at least 8 times. When the client first retained us, 6 months into it, a year into it, when we were planning and coming in 2024, everything has to be prearranged. I have to tell the officer, we're coming, the clients are coming, we have these documents, prepare for the interview, will you see them? I have to make sure this case can get approved, right? And then I would say, oh, sorry, client got deported from Mexico. The officer is just like this, right? But it's out of their control. So one of the things I think won this case when we saw the officer and explained the whole thing was simply they know we've been trying to come back for 2 years. So even though they left in 2018, they didn't get back until 2025. It was really like 2023, right? Because that's when we started inquiring and trying to get them in. And there's reasons after reasons they just could not come in, but we kept the officer up to date on this entire process. So when we finally picked them up at the airport, and then, when we saw the officer, I immediately said, on top of everything that you already know, the clients got robbed last night by officers and like lost $500, lost the phone, lost everything. And the officer just like looked at me quietly and just said, "There's nothing I could do." Really, when it rains, it pours. And the misfortune that this family had to endure, starting with USCIS, not approving their permanent green cards like years and years ago. That's like one big hiccup on the EB5 investment community. And then COVID, and then all the things that happened within their own family and business that had to keep them abroad, and then not being able to fly in, and then the tourist agency failing them, the new president of Mexico failing them. Of course, it's not her fault, or she's doing her job. But, just change in politics, change in foreign policy caused them to be deported, right? So I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying that's a misfortune.
We have a question
oh,
from TikTok.
Okay.
Will first-time DACA applicants get processed now?
Okay. We'll answer DACA questions in a bit. But I guess short answer, no. Sorry. So, I mean, if you don't want to watch the rest of it, I totally understand. But yes, DACA, you need to have it. You could file, yeah. So sorry about that. But if you have DACA, you should definitely apply for advanced parole. But now, going back to the success story, as lawful permanent residents trying to enter the country, you really have to consider your lawful permanent residency as like a mini right to be in the United States. But as we're seeing in the news day in and day out, the United States government can easily revoke your green card. Easily, okay? I've seen them done so many times throughout my career. A simple notice of intent to revoke, boom, your green card is gone. The consulate, the CBP officers, they stop you, they confiscate the green card, boom, it's gone. So trying to fulfill your rights and obligations as a green card holder is paramount. And one of the core things that you need to do is to live in the country. And if you do not live in the country, you need to file a reentry permit. And yes, maybe in the past 10 years, they've been a little bit looser. But honestly, if you're able to scroll past time, back before 2020, CBP officers were very strict on green card holders who left the country. I've seen cases where they leave the country for 6 months and their green card gets confiscated. That was pre-COVID, So people have gotten used to the idea the past 10 years. Oh, if I just fly in every 6 months, if I just have a good excuse, it will be fine. It's not gonna be like that anymore. Okay, it's gonna get harder and harder. COVID was a temporary measure. They released the standards, but now it's getting back, right? So in 2023, 2024, we've already seen a lot of people who fly into the country, even if they've only left the US for 1 year, their green card got confiscated. Now, the most intense one is that they left the country for less than 1 year, their green card not only got confiscated, but they got sent directly to court. Now, of course, when we're reviewing their case, yes, they didn't leave the country for over a year, but they didn't apply for reentry permits. They, the past 10 years, their case looks really, really weak. So it's tough, right? But if you left the U.S. for more than 2 years, more than 3 years, you really have to be careful. Really prepare well. Don't answer incorrectly. These clients, we spent 2 years to prepare everything. The officer knew that we were spending 2 years to prepare everything, and all the misfortunes that happened. Honestly, if you were to ask me about this case, why ultimately it won, I think it's because the officer just seen the misfortune one after another after another. All documented, all true, all in real time. And because of that, the officer said, sure. It isn't somebody just showing up and giving a bland excuse. I've been out of the country for 7 years and my mother was sick. Like, they hear that all the time, and they you just don't want to be here, right? I know that. But because they've seen us trying to liaison for them for past 2 years and all the things that happened, it's not fake. Who would want to fly to Mexico, get locked up for a day, and get deported, right? I mean, that's just insane. But that's what they had to go through. But luckily, all that misfortune led to a very successful entry, which is the most important part because it saved their green card. And then they were able to get the 551 stamp, and then everything is saved. Now, that was our job. I'm glad they had the faith and the courage to go through it. In reviewing the notes for this success story, we reviewed everything. Amy, who's the lead attorney on this case, wrote on the bottom of the case. Let me see if I have it. I have it right here. The whole process was very complicated, hard, and long. That's the concluding thought of Amy who worked on this case. I could hear her sigh. The whole process was very complicated, hard, and long. and then she adds, almost every case has a long story before they meet you. I mean, those are the notes that she gave me. I just think it's funny, but hopefully this story sheds some light on these stories, right? I know I talk about these stories in a matter of like what, 5 minutes, 7, 8 minutes. You see it like, oh, so simple. You make the argument, but it took years to prepare before we executed. So, hope you guys could see all the little, clogs that go into this machine to make it work. If you have any questions about the success story, feel free to reach out. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. So now that was the success story. All right. Well, yep. Anybody who has any questions can feel free to ask.
I feel like you love turning the most negative fact patterns I can think of into a positive.
Yep. It's called spinning, right? In law school, we're taught really, really look at the facts and see how you can spin it. Not lying. Lying is for amateurs. Any 3-year-old kid can lie. But how do you really look at it and really help your argument, right? One of my favorite cases that I've done that's Mexico entry that's just like this is they got 3 SB1 denials. So they went to the consulate. The consulate said, sorry, we will not approve your case. Goodbye. And then another consulate and another consulate. 3 different consulates, Hong Kong, Singapore, and China, all denied their SB1 visa, so they couldn't fly back. When I went to the officer, I made the argument, if the client did not want the green card, would they put themselves through 3 separate applications to get 3 denials, right? The fact that they got denied, it's like proof that they really want to. Think of it as an analogy of a guy chasing a girl and proposing. If the guy did not love her, would he propose 3 times and get rejected 3 times publicly? No. So therefore, he had the intent that he wants to. So that was a fun one. And then this one, of course, if they did not want to come back, would they subject themselves to all this trial and tribulation?
Right. Yeah. So I see a friend is a citizen and their wife crossed as a child.
Okay.
And got caught saying she was a U.S. citizen.
Oh.
Even though her husband is a citizen, their lawyer advises them not to go to an interview in Mexico because she has a permanent ban. What do you think about this?
So, you need to first do a FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, with the CBP officer. And really double check it. The reason is because your memory and what's in the file might be different. We've seen cases like this before, tons of them, and it works both ways. Maybe the person remembered that they said they were a U.S. citizen and they entered. But if in their file that was not notated, then there's no proof that happened and their memory could be wrong. That's one. Or they think that they did not say they're a citizen, but in the file it said that they were admitted as a U.S. citizen. Well, who is the consulate going to trust, the file or them? So, if there is any sort of potential that this might happen, do a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act. It's a beautiful law that we have in the United States that allows for the United States government to give you all the files that belong to you, right? So you could do a FOIA at DMV, you could do a FOIA at CBP, you could do a FOIA at the consulate, you could do a FOIA with USCIS. Any government agencies that have your personal file, it belongs to you. Now, they could redact certain things, it's government secrecy, but they're supposed to give you the whole thing. It takes, technically supposed to be 20 days by law, but 6 months to 9 months, this is sort of the expectation. But if you do that and nothing shows that you have claimed to be a U.S. citizen, well, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody heard it, did it happen? Who knows?
FOIA document says she said U.S. citizen, but she didn't know English and she was a child.
That is harder, much harder. because somebody else could have claimed U.S. citizen on her behalf, right? So, but because the file is like that, there is definitely a risk of permanent bar. So, if she is here in the United States and you're supposed to go overseas to the consulate to get your green card, consulate decisions, 99.9999% cannot be overturned. So you take a huge risk trusting that consulate officer. However, if you are in the United States, you find another way to do adjustment of status. And during the adjustment of status process, if the USCIS officer did not check the CBP records, or they decide to approve you, they have the discretion to. And you can potentially file a waiver and explain away that you're a child, you didn't say it, right? So my recommendation, and I probably...
Remember, we can't give information.
Yeah, based on what I know so far, generally speaking, if somebody did potentially say that you're a U.S. citizen, yeah, you should not leave the country.
Another question, their immigration lawyer advised them not to do advanced parole because it's not safe. What do you think about that?
I'm assuming you're a DACA, right? So, but let's just say you're not a DACA, okay? But anybody who has the right and opportunity to file advanced parole, it's just a matter of cost right now to file it with USCIS. If it gets denied, it gets denied. You just wasted some time and money and the paperwork, right? But the bigger question is, once it gets approved by USCIS, should you leave the country and come back and actualize it? This makes a world of difference for people who are in DACA status, the dreamers. Because for everybody else, advanced parole is just a baby green card. It's just a temporary measure before they get the real thing. So if people have emergencies, you have emergencies. And sometimes you can even get emergency advanced paroles within 1 or 2 days, right? You go to the InfoPass, you go to USCIS, and they can potentially grant it to you in 1 day. We've done that before in the past, but that's a whole separate story, right? So for normal people who are in the green card process, getting advanced parole is not that big of an issue. It's just a matter of timing, right? If your mother is passing away, you need to leave the U.S. Can you wait the 4 months, or can you do an emergency one? Now, for DACA holders, if you can get an advanced parole and actualize it, meaning you leave the country and you come back in and you get admitted, well, now you have been inspected, admitted into the United States, and that qualifies you to apply for the 45 green card through the 245A. That opens that door for you. Obviously, get married to a U.S. citizen in order for that to happen, right? But that becomes an option. I guess you don't have to get married to a U.S. citizen. If your parents are a U.S. citizen, they can petition for you too, right? So there's a couple other, but it opens the option to filing for adjustment of status to get a green card. So the bigger question is, if you did file advanced parole with USCIS, and if you did get approved, should you leave and come back in? And I can tell you, I was just at the border last week, and I was talking to CBP officers, and they are approving people coming in. And we represent tons of clients who do advanced paroles, and we help them, and then they come back in on a weekly basis. So I obviously cannot speak for all ports of entries. If you're flying in JFK, if you're going to Canada, if you're going to, but at least all of our clients have successfully came in. Not a single one have been denied. Now, I know it's a huge risk, right? You've been in the U.S. for so long. You file for advanced parole. You're hoping for this green card. If you leave and you can't get back in, that will be nightmare. I understand that. I totally understand that. But I just want to say that fear and that decision doesn't kick in until after your advanced parole actually gets approved, right? So applying for it with USCIS is one thing. If they don't approve it, you don't even have to worry. At least you tried. But after it gets approved, should you actually leave? That's the next question. And from our cases, from my study, and from me as an eyewitness, as personally doing it at the border with the officers, it has all been approved. Now, are there ones that they don't approve? Yes, there are. And who are they? The people who just cross the border and within a few hours try to come back in. They're obviously lying, right? You apply for advanced parole for work reasons, for education reasons, for humanitarian reasons. What possible reason did you apply for advanced parole that you cross the border for a few hours and come back, even for a day, right? It doesn't make much sense. So that's my recommendation. Still apply for the advanced parole. Make a good argument. Keep all the documents, keep all the records, and then when you go, leave the country. It doesn't mean, sometimes it's not Mexico. It could be anywhere else in the country. Go fulfill the promise that you made, and then document it. And when you come back in, show the officer why you left. And if you want to be extra safe, show everything else. Show why you qualify for DACA. Where did you graduate? High school. Where do you work? Your tax returns. Where do you live? You have no criminal history. Show them that you are a good, upstanding citizen. You know, and if all of that checks out, it will be very shocking and newsworthy, you know, in a negative way for the CBP officer if they denied you. Now, on the other hand, if you have criminal records, if you barely got your DACA approved, if you recently got a major DUI, if you have domestic violence on your record, you might be in the category the officer says, nah, I don't want to help you, right? So, case by case, but I definitely a blanket statement of saying, right now, because of the political climate, don't apply for advanced parole. Personally, I think that's incorrect.
Do you know if interviews are still being waived for adjustment of status through marriage?
We still saw some. So how long is it going to continue? I'm not entirely sure. The presidency definitely changed things. For the past 4 years, a lot of the interviews have been waived. But from what we're hearing through the pipeline, they are not trying, they're trying to do all the interviews now because that's the directive. But maybe because some of the cases were already pre-approved, they're trying to waive the best ones just to try to process the cases faster. I think you can expect that. But if you're asking, if I file now, will my interview be waived? I would place the bet that it will not be. If you filed your case 3 years ago, would it be waived? That's still a maybe.
Someone says, I wish we could just do advanced parole, just enter and leave. I'm so terrified of leaving, staying out for weeks, and then not being let in.
Yes, I totally understand. Now, if you are that terrified, work on your case. That's always my recommendation, right? You wake up in the middle of the night, you're scared, and you don't know what to do. Just get to work, right? Open up your laptop and start preparing. Why do I need to leave? I need to see my grandma. I haven't seen her this long. This is where she lives. This is the plane ticket. This is how much it costs. And I need to go take care of her. And here are my grades. And here's where I work. And I took a 3-day leave. I asked my boss, you know, I need to come back and I need to fix this roof. I need to do this thing. Like there's thing, you know, I have my kid here and they and I have to take them to school. And now I'm having a nanny take care of them. Document every single thing about your life. Print it all out, put it in a binder, just get to work. And once you have all of this, at some point you're gonna feel like you would be the devil to not let me in, right? Build your case so you are super persuasive. And then, obviously I'm recommending file the advanced parole first and then document all, well, I mean, I guess you need to document and make the argument and then file, but then document more. Right? You might be filing with USCIS like 10 documents to show why you need to leave. And then if you cannot sleep at night, then document like 100 things, right? And then if you're still really worried, right? Last ditch effort, go to the border. Before you get into Mexico, right? The CBP officers are in the US. See if you could talk to a CBP officer and say, hey, I am terrified of going, but here's my situation. Can you take a look, please? And maybe, just maybe, they might take a look. Maybe they'll give you your card. Maybe they'll say, go visit your grandma. I'll see you in 3 days. Maybe. I cannot guarantee that they will do that. As attorneys, that's what we do for our clients. As individuals, you are part of the American fabric, right? So it might take you a little longer, but out of that, you know, safety precaution, that's something you could think about.
Question from TikTok. My husband has advanced parole approved.
Okay.
TPS from El Salvador.
Jeez.
And a removal order. Can he travel? He did it once.
I would not. That I would not recommend. Okay, that. But you know, I cannot recommend as a general rule, and I also want to put a disclaimer. Immigration law is usually broken down into three brackets. There's business immigration, there's family immigration, and then there's removal, core humanitarian, right? These three different brackets. Our firm, 99% falls into the family and the business category. So we don't do the core deportation, removal stuff. So that is not my field of expertise. So I just want to, so as a general rule, knowing a lot of immigration practitioners who do practice in this space, that's what they told me. So I'm just relaying the message. But you should definitely find a very competent lawyer, immigration lawyer that deals with that to give you advice. But from what I know, TPS is not doing well right now in this administration, in the travel bans. If you have a removal order, that's even worse. So you have 2 strikes against you, so you're taking just like a huge risk. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's all information. We can't make any recommendations without knowing your case more.
Right.
Okay, I'm trying to answer all the questions as they come in.
Okay.
Can I do AP even if I have a removal proceeding? Pretty similar.
Oh, can you file for advance parole if you have a removal proceeding? So the answer is you can file for advance parole. It could potentially still be granted by USCIS. But when you try to use the advance parole and get back into the country, and when the CBP officer sees you have a removal proceeding, that might not be a good look. In my opinion, from having been at the border talking to the CBP officers, what they have told me is that if they see a removal order, they will defer it to ICE because they will say, this person is trying to come in. They have a removal order. Do you want to pick him up for detention? And my second question is, what will ICE do? And CBP officers told me, ICE will say, no, we are not going to spend the time and the resource to go down to pick this person up, to put them in bond proceedings, removal proceedings, and then just to kick him out. We're not going to do it. We're not going to go pick him up. And the CBP officer will then say, okay, well, it's out of our jurisdiction. We cannot let you in. ICE is not willing to pick you up. So now you're just stuck. All in all, meaning you wasted your advance parole and now you're stuck outside. That is from the latest, as of last week, physically there. Because I'm actually dealing with a case like this. Okay, I'm just sharing. That is the latest news I've got. I'm still trying to work on it because I'm still trying to get the client in. I mean, long story short, they already got the advance parole. They already left. They left years ago. But that's just another story. If it gets approved, I'll do another live session and talk about that, right? But I would not recommend if you. But again, that's not my field of expertise, right? I don't do removal. I don't do detention stuff. Yeah.
I did EAP through DACA. Will that be brought up in my interview for AOS through marriage?
You got a work permit through
DACA.
Okay, and then?
Will that be brought up in my marriage interview for AOS?
Let me rephrase the question. I am trying to get a green card by marrying a U.S. citizen. Will my DACA status come into play?
Oh, not work permit. Oh, yeah, not EAD. Employee Assistance Program.
Oh,
Emergency Advance Parole. Sorry.
Okay.
Acronyms.
Okay. Emergency Advance Parole. Will that come up? I guess in this. Okay, I guess in the sense of it has to. Well, okay. First, I'm assuming. Okay, I have to do this correctly because on TikTok I got yelled at for this. All right. As a DACA person, most people entered without inspection. They entered illegally, right? That's most people. But some people entered with a visa. So if you entered with a visa and you overstayed and now you're married to a U.S. citizen and you got a DACA, your advance parole wouldn't really be an issue. Now, if you entered illegally, EWI, you need the advanced parole to be actualized in order for your adjustment of status to even move forward. Will this issue come up? I hope USCIS officers are trained well enough that they know it, so they don't have to ask you about it and have you prove it, etc., etc., etc. Right? The key issue is you did enter with your advanced parole, and so you qualify to adjust status. So they're more so concerned about your marriage is real, you're a good citizen. You know, it's a box that they check. Now, should you be prepared to answer? When did you come in? How did you get your advanced parole? What did you do overseas? Yes, prepare a little bit. But in my experience, and all of these cases, that is not the main part of their interview. In a adjustment of status marriage interview, let's say it's 30 minutes, 15 minutes of it is about your form, about swearing in, about going through, making sure you are who you are, and double checking core things. Another maybe 10 minutes about your marriage, whether it's bona fide or not. So whether or not you use your advanced parole accurately is very, very low on their checklist of things that they're concerned about.
And Joseph, I know you have a consultation coming up at 1, so we're going to have to end it soon. I'm really sorry, guys. We are going live next week, too. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get to all your questions, but one last one from Instagram. Okay. What green card or visa options are available for law enforcement agents? What if the agency refuses to sponsor an informant even though they have worked with them for 3 years?
Jeez, that sucks. You know, you're already helping them, doing so many things, but they're not willing to sign off on it. Find another one to help you sign off on it, right? So there's so many agencies, many local law enforcement, police departments, every single one, they have their own personnel that can sign off on things. So if you're working as an informant, if you're working with one agency, see what case you're working on and how it touches on different agencies, and maybe somebody else is willing to sign off on it. 3 years is a long time, but sometimes that's how long it takes. I know there's some cases that took like 5 years before they're willing to sign off to say you are a credible witness to this important case. That's one part of the question. The other part of the question is military parole. So if you're, if your spouse is in the military or retired in the military, and that's including all the different agencies under the military umbrella, you could potentially file for a military in place. But if you don't have a spouse that's in the military and you're just working as an informant, then unfortunately, U visa, trying to get it through an agency, you need that document to be signed. I hope this was helpful. I love doing the live things. Feel free to stay in touch. I'm going to try to do this every Thursday. And every Thursday, it's going to be a different success story. And I'm going to talk about interesting things that's related to that. But you can also send in your questions before. And also, this entire live session is recorded. We're not going to disclose your personal information, just my answers. And we're going to release it on YouTube, right? So you can go back and rewatch it. So hopefully this is helpful. If you can't make the live session next week, send in the questions. Hopefully I can answer it.
Yeah. Or if you want to schedule a consultation with us.
Oh, yes.
An hour long.
Yes.
You can book that on our website, tsangslaw.com. Should be linked in our bio.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, all my partners will be very upset. Yes, this is an advertisement. Please, if you like consultation, we would love to share everything we do. It might not be me. A lot of people here are very, very capable. In fact, almost everybody is more capable than I am.
So modest. But yes, we will go live same time this week. Feel free to submit more questions. We'll try to answer more. And yeah, feel free to book any consultation if you want an hour with Joseph or one of our really capable attorneys.
Yeah. Take care. See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.